Hey everyone, it's Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got my mate from Glasgow, Scotland, Davy Gallagher. How are you, mate?
Very well, Peter. How are you? Good evening, I suppose, but good morning here.
It is good morning and good morning. No, it's good evening here and good morning to you. I get confused with the time zones, but anyway, we're going to cover a Britpop classic, Pulp Different Class from 1995. So, Davey and I were sort of shooting the breeze as to our follow-up to Stone Roses, which was really enjoyable. And I think this is a really worthy and another great album to cover. So, as we did with Stone Roses, we're just going to talk about our first impressions of this album, Pulp Different Class. And just, if okay with you, Dave, we just go song by song into the mind of Jarvis Cocker.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for having me back.
Absolutely. So,
Peter,
what was your first impressions of this album?
this album was a bit of an odd one, because Pulp had been building up. They weren't like Oasis or Blur, where it felt like, my goodness, they've just come out and absolutely smashed it. But they had His and Hers, the album before this, in 1994, which was a little bit of a breakthrough, and you started to hear things on the radio. But it was with Different Class itself when it came out in 1995, where you were hearing them as ubiquitously on the radio as you were with bands like Blur and Oasis and whoever. And this album became pretty much the soundtrack to the alternative Britpop, if you will, taking away the laddish culture of Oasis or the Cockneyish culture of Damon Albarn's version of Blur at that point, who ditched that themselves, but they were leaning into park life and countryman and things. Whereas this was very much now we are British, but we're a very specific type of British type album, led by, as you say, Jarvis Cocker. And there's a reason why, unlike, say, Oasis, Blur, Radiohead, most people can only name one member of Pulp, and that is Jarvis Cocker, because it is very much his vision lyrically.
Yes, it is.
They are a great band, and but they did have a bit more of a revolving door even at this period. And Jarvis is always the one who had the nous to come up with the ideas, and it's very autobiographical. The whole Pulp canon, but especially this record.
Yeah, absolutely. And this band started in 1983, so they weren't actually an overnight success story. And
No.
to me, I think it's the most heartwarming story out of the whole Britpop scene, how they finally got the success that they probably deserved. And
Yeah.
this album is being cited as one of the great Britpop albums, and rightly so. And it's right up there. It's top shelf with your top shelf Blur and Oasis and a Suede. I don't know if you call them Britpop. Maybe not. But
I suppose because of the time you would, but the
mm,
sound to me is a bit more alternative.
yeah, maybe they were a little bit just on the edge. But any of those
But
bands in that
yeah,
period, and
a bit like Radiohead, they were at the same time, but they're not Britpop really.
yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, what we can do is we'll just go song by song. And I saw you put a Facebook post today about the cracking opening track. So tell me about
Yeah.
your views on the Misshapes.
So again, it's a bit of a different one from Stone Roses because a lot of the themes on this album are the same as other tracks on the record. It's not an album that's all over the shop in terms of the songs about this, the songs about that. Most of them tend to be about one thing and one thing only, which actually this track isn't so much. It is quite an interesting way to open it. But Misshapes is very much an anthem for the outsider.
Yes.
Misshapes was called that because I don't know if you have them, but you used to be able to buy chocolate factories would have misshapen ones where you could buy, if they fell off the factory line the wrong shape, you could buy them half price.
Yeah, I know the principle. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jarvis liked the notion of that we're misshapes. We are literally it cites broken biscuits in the lyrics as well. And that's another thing you can buy in the UK. I don't know if you get them. It's literally just exactly the same biscuits, but they happen to be broken in the factory, so you can get them half price. So Jarvis is kind of identifying the outsider through biscuit form, which is possibly the most British way to open an album you can imagine. But you think that would be a little bit tween, a little bit, what could that possibly be? It's a hell of a rocker too, and it's a hell of an
Yeah.
anthem. So it turns into this great guitar rock piece right in the middle where it's going, we're making a move, we're making it now. And it just keeps going
Yeah.
up and up and up. We want your homes, we want your land. And it's just going up and up and up. We won't use guns, we won't use bombs. We'll use the one thing we've got more of, and that's our minds. And it's much more of a rocker than the rest of the album is,
Yep.
pretty
Great
much
opener.
Pulp's canon is. And it was a double A-side single and a great way to open the record because it is very much, even though it's thematically different to most of the rest of the record, it's such a great way to say, we're not Blur, we're not Oasis, we are something else. It's like I'm Not Like Everybody Else by the Kinks or Misfits by the Kinks, but apparently very much like the Kinks. It's just a great kind of outsider's anthem saying we're not just happy to be different, we're going to sing about it. And Jarvis didn't like singing this track for a few years because he started to realize that the same people the song's about who would bully people at him in the streets growing up
In
started
Sheffield.
to
Yeah.
turn up at festivals and started being the one singing along, and he felt a bit kind of weird about that. Townies, as he calls them. So yeah, kind of different feelings.
Oh, that's a great analogy. I think I love the opening lyric, misshapes, mistakes, misfits. I think it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
And it's an anthem for the awkward. And
yeah,
basically it's just sort of aiming at the thugs. And it's really funny how you just sort of described it in the audience. The thugs are the ones that are sort of picking up in a lyric, but not picking up on the whole song, that it's actually directed at them.
yeah.
And I find it's got a little bit of a 60s soul stomper feel to it. Yeah. Which is prevalent for a lot of this pop out album. So
Yeah, yeah,
bit of a soul
yeah,
stomper. Went to number 2 too. So
yeah. With
first single, first cab off the
yeah,
rank.
double A side. We'll come to the other side of that single, which was the much more controversial side of the single.
Yeah.
But to me, this is one of the best. Stick it on, and I have
Stomper.
I have to turn this up a little bit. It's one of those tracks.
Yeah.
Volume down. So.
And I need to just sort of interject and put in that they had a really 4-star diamond producer. They had Chris Thomas, Pink
Yes, it
Floyd,
did.
INXS, Pretenders, Roxy Music. Look at his, it's just a laundry list of classic bands. So for them to get get him behind the desk was a real cue. And look, they've been described as art rock. And I kind of get it because it's intellectual. It's intellectual music because the lyrics are deep and it's all about social commentary. And I don't think, Blur does it as well, pretty well, but they make these kitchen sink songs into a total big cineramic melodrama. They are really good at doing these kitchen sink melodramas where the mundane is just extraordinary in that
Yeah.
in a concept of a song. And this one is just a perfect example of that. So
Yeah, it's like the angry young men writers of the early '60s. You can tell they influenced,
the
Joe Watt.
Kinks definitely
Yeah,
is a bit of
yeah.
lineage. Yeah.
And novelists like Osborne and Silito and stuff that you can see that he would have been a fan of those kind of. It's Graham Up North and those kind of kitchen sink dramas like Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner and whatnot, and Billy Liar. You can see Jarvis playing those out in lyrics. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
a Northern Ray Davies is actually quite a good analogy in a strange way.
Yeah, yeah. Pencil Skirt. Now, this is a really stark second song, and it's really out
Yeah,
there, and he pulls it off.
yeah.
Tell me what you think of this song.
Pencil Skirt's such a different take, and this is where we do start to get the theme of the album more, and it's a lot about Jarvis either being incredibly horny or wishing he had more action, remembering that he had action years ago and wishes he had
Or
it again.
yearning for action. Yeah, yearning for
Yeah.
action. Yeah.
So but never in a sleazy way. That's the strange thing. It always comes across as,
But I
and
kissed your mother twice.
yeah. And he's working on your dad. It's it's very much it is quite a sexy, jazzy little track in a strange way. Jarvis doing his best kind of whispery je t'aime vocal almost, a bit Jane
Nonchalant,
Birkin.
laid back,
Yeah.
a bit
Um,
breathy. I think
yeah,
it's
but
just completely satirical. I just think he's
yeah,
taken the piss, and
yeah, it's
he's
like
he's it's satire on the UK sexual mores, I think, because
yeah.
UK being very repressed and conservative, and he's
Mhm.
opening it up, and it's sort of like yeah, he's just wink wink.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of that, and he's doing it through a kind of full Burt Bacharach crooner style
Mm,
on this track, which with some great kind of Joe Meek style guitars. But again, lyrically, it's so densely odd and it should be sleazy. But Jarvis has always got this something about him that's like, no, he's too knowing for that. He always knows exactly when to say, "Oh, come on, you get the joke." And if you don't get the joke, you're not listening to this album anyway.
this is not for you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. All right, we're on the same page. Yeah, I think that's a really clever second song. Right. Now, the third song is one of the couple of songs on this album that absolutely tower over the rest of the songs. Probably,
yeah,
maybe unfairly, but
yeah.
this is a true anthem. And in their song set, it's probably the encore, and you can understand it. And we're talking about Common People, which is, to me, they're one of their masterpieces on this album. What's your views on this one?
So it's great. It's about those and I don't know how much other countries have them, but this type of rich young person who wants to slum it with the working class and thinks it's all a bit of fun and games. And in this case, she wants to live with common people, wants to sleep with common people. She has to be taken to a supermarket and told, pretend you've got no money, and that's just bizarre to her. It's such a great track. Again, such a different track. No, Blur and Oasis couldn't have done this track. I mean, Jarvis's vocals again are very understated on it. It's almost like a talking track for the first 3 minutes or so when she's going, she came from Greece, she had a thirst for knowledge. She studied sculpture at St. Martin's College. That's where I caught her eye. So it's got a wonderful kind of talking narrative to it. So you can't really miss what he's saying in this one. And how this girl is so dense, but she's obviously come from money that she can't even imagine. She just wants to be with common people and do whatever common people would do. She it does pick up. It doesn't always stay as the talking track, but it's a great synthy track as well underneath it all. There's
Yeah.
just this wonderful, simple, very 80s, very early 80s kind of new wave underpinning it, which is very different to a lot of Britpop that was very much 60s inspired. This very much has a kind of new wave dance feel to it underneath it. You can see it being stripped back to that, and it's really just a takedown of that kind of girl and guy who would slum it with the working class, and it's kind of Jarvis's defensive. So it's not very fun having to watch your pennies and turn the lights out because you can't afford the electricity, and having to count your pennies at the supermarket. But it's such an anthem, and I don't think it was ever supposed to be. That's the bizarre thing about Common People. It feels like that's the one that took them by surprise, even.
Yeah, huge hit.
Yeah.
Went to UK and Scotland,
Yeah.
#2.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a backstory. So Jarvis was asked what the background to this song was. So apparently he met this student, a Greek art student, when he was at the Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design.
Mm-hmm.
And he lusted after her, but she didn't want to have a bar of him. She was quite aloof. And one of the things in the discussion, she said she wanted to move to Hackney and live like the common people. So he picked up on this and created a song. And, this interaction with this Greek art student was only for two weeks. So I find it fascinating that it's kind of reversed the stereotype, because it's the female interest in the male, when the reality was Jarvis was interested in her as the protagonist. Anyway, some wags actually tracked down who they thought may be this real Greek art student, and she's apparently married to some politician. And she was sort of denying she was the one, but there was some correspondence on social media between Jarvis and this person that sort of alludes that she was the art student in person. So yeah, there are real people behind these songs, and this was one particular character behind that song. Have you ever heard that story before? Or?
No, I haven't, but I do know that almost everything on this album, if a place is named, including from the other big hit that we're about to come to in a couple of tracks, if a place is named and a person's named, that's the place and person. There's never any changing of the stories or, well, this is inspired by. It tends to pretty much be Jarvis's diary turned into poetry, really. Because we'll meet Deborah in a couple of tracks, So
he's like the Taylor Swift of the '90s, wasn't he? He was just putting real relationships and into his songs. But
I'm sure he'd love the comparison. Yeah.
But UK, we don't have it in Australia so much, and America, they definitely probably don't have it as much. But there is the class system in UK, and that's been for a considerable period of time. And to me, I think this is a satire between the haves and the have-nots. Yeah. And it's perfectly encapsulated in this little story. And I love the video clip, where he's in the being pushed in the trolley, the shopping trolley. Thought that was kind of great.
That's one thing we should make. The videos for Pulp are fantastic as well. They're one of the bands who, I think that's maybe something that helped push them really over the edge. They knew how to use videos at this point to really sell the story, and not just be, again, Blur and Oasis, because that was the big two that you had to be more than to get anywhere in Britpop. So they might do that with the videos.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to mention is I think his vocals are very David Bowie-esque. When it gets to the crescendo, it reminds me of Ziggy Stardust, that Bowie era where he's really got that similar sort of tonality to his voice. Do you find that comparison?
Yeah, and I also find, and we'll come up to it in a second, that the next track, I Spy, is very much him doing Scott Walker kind of thing.
I wrote that down.
Yeah.
Let's talk about I Spy. Let's get into it.
So he has this kind of amalgamation of, because there's definitely glam in here as well. You're right, there's definitely Bowie all over it. but then he goes into this Scott Walker, but specifically not Scott Walker and the Walker Brothers. Scott Walker doing those very esoteric solo albums, Scott 1, 2, 3, 4, doing the Jacques Brel covers and things. That's very much where I Spy lands. And that's the other side of his vocals, where it's that much more crooning style.
Yes.
And it's got this wonderful orchestration. It sounds like a Bond theme.
I wrote that down, John Barry.
Yeah, which is great because they submitted Tomorrow Never Lies as a Bond theme in 1997, and it was rejected. I've got it in a bootleg. You can get it on YouTube. And we ended up with, who did the theme tune for Tomorrow Never Dies? Sheryl Crow. What a more interesting world it would be if Pulp did a Bond theme.
Yeah, I can't even remember. I've seen every Bond film, but I can't even remember that one.
Well, she was pulled in at the last minute because K.D. Lang's Surrender was deemed to be not famous enough. K.D. Lang wasn't famous enough, so if she wasn't, and Pulp certainly weren't. So they wanted somebody more American for that track. But I Spy, the great thing about it is, even though it's got the Bonds, like it's got the kind of crooning vocal that you can imagine from a Bond thing, because Scott Walker could have done a Bond theme, in the kind of Matt Monroe style from Russia with Love, and you've got this wonderfully lush orchestration. The lyrics are absolutely insane. I mean, it's going through this affair, and this again, it's full of lust and full of the spy who's, again, he is singing about a spy, so it's not an unintentional similarity to have a Bond theme. He's singing about being a spy, but his favorite thing about being a spy is sleeping with all the
and getting revenge against the middle classes.
Yes.
So it's so clever. He brings this whole analogy of being a spy, but brings it into a class analogy.
Yeah,
getting his revenge against the upper and middle classes.
Even when he's a spy, it turns into a class warfare, and Jarvis wants to have, a fun night. Still, when he's a spy, he has to turn it into that, which I love. And you've got lyrics like, grass is something you smoke, birds are something you shag. I mean, there's nothing more mid-90s than that. It sounds like something out of Austin Powers, really. Which we're very much in the era of that. We literally had, at this point, that would have still been considered a controversial lyric, and then we literally have a film called The Spy Who Shagged Me coming out a couple of years later. It's a very different time, as you said, for social mores in the UK, and this is that kind of turning point where youth culture turns into cool Britannia, as Britpop was kind of also, where the permissive society did either disappear or just turned a blind eye for a while until about 12 years ago, where it kind of came back again.
Yeah, I love the bit where he goes he does the la la and that's matched with the orchestra. I think that's a real high point, and to me, that's where I think he's at the Scott Walker. He's really channeling that Scott Walker type of sound. Because some of those Scott Walker albums, as you said, 1, 2, 3, they are wacky arrangements. They're melodramatic, they're sort of cinematic, and they're wild.
I remember the first one I played, I think it was just Scott 1, and it starts with Matilde, and it's just this crazy arrangement, and I only knew the Walker Brothers for, make it easy on yourself, and the sun ain't going to shine anymore, and that kind of stuff. And then you get this bizarre, huge arrangement, and then I started reading up about Jacques Brel and things, and you can see exactly those influences on Jarvis's style, musically and lyrically.
All right, that's great. So the next one, this is one of my picks. It's one of the great songs on the album, and again, it's one of those ones that towers over the rest of it, is Disco 2000. I love this song. Went to UK number 7. I like his vocal delivery, and I love the way he sort of says her name was Deborah. I just love it.
Deborah. I'm disappointed that this went to number 7, because to me, this isn't just one of the best tracks of this album. It's one of the best tracks of the 90s for me. It's, again, impossibly British, but it's it's still a great rock track as well at the same time, but a wonderful kind of wistful rock track, which is such a strange dichotomy, but Jarvis nails it. And so fun. People will still dance to it despite the fact it's quite a sad, lonely track when you just read the lyrics.
Yeah.
And you're right, the way he even manages to enunciate on it. Your name is Deborah, Deborah.
Deborah. Yeah.
It never suited you. Yeah. And when it goes into the yeah, Deborah, do you recall your house was very small with
I, lo-
wood chip on the wall?
I love that lyric, and he says, and they said that when we grew up, we'd get married and never split up. Oh,
Yeah.
we never did it, although I often thought of it. And
Thought
it's
of
just,
it. Yeah.
it's just so, it's sort of unreal. I mean, we've all had unrequited love, haven't we? You
Mhm.
know, sort of someone who we wanted and they didn't want us. And that really burns, that lyric. It's just
Yeah,
so
and
heartfelt. And that lyric sums up the heart of Jarvis Cocker and this whole
yeah,
album. It's got heart.
yeah. And when he's singing the actual chorus itself, which is such an anthemic chorus, despite being such a on paper a sad lyric. Let's all meet up in the year 2000, and everybody's pumping their fists and things.
Yeah.
Won't it be strange when we're all fully grown? Be there 2 o'clock by the fountain down the road. That's a real thing as well, because he did ask Deborah to meet him at the fountain down the road,
Yeah.
and he never hooked up with. Well, no, I think it's Deborah came out years later and said they did hook up, but it was never going to be anything more than that. And
Well,
when
you're
he's
right.
singing,
There's a real Deborah, and
yeah,
she sadly passed away with cancer.
he
But
does, yeah,
it's based on a real person. He grew
Mhm.
up with her, and he always had a love or a yearning for her, and she didn't. She just regarded it as a friend, even though I think
Yeah.
they might have had a relationship, but it was nothing terribly deep from her side. But I think it's devastating, some of this. It's just you're grooving on the dance floor, because I used to go to a lot of these Britpop clubs because they had a bit of a scene in Sydney in the 90s, and this was a showstopper. Everyone going to get on the dance floor and you're
Yeah,
dancing, but the lyrics are sort of really kind of sad. And
because
it's sort of,
you have that crunching guitar of the intro parts and the
mm,
verses, and then it's got that strange little kind of downbeat. The oh, Deborah,
disco-y, a little bit of a
here we
disco-y beat.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, your house was very small. Then that's all quite
Yeah.
dreamy. And then it really kicks into the chorus, and it does have you stomping and dancing. But it
Yeah.
is just ultimately about this sad, lonely guy who, is living down there on his own, on wishing that he'd said something differently on that damp and lonely Thursday years ago, and still singing all these years later. What are you doing Sunday, baby? Would you like to come and meet me? Maybe you can even bring your baby. He's still lusting after Deborah all those years later. So
Yeah. I think the
it's
emotional heart of this album resides in that
yeah,
song. And
yeah.
I might be controversial, but I think this has got more emotional heart than 5 Oasis albums combined. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but
well,
I'm sorry, but I think it's just so vulnerable.
yeah. There's certainly because he's using real stories, it's hard not to be. If
Mm,
he's a real person, then by default it will be, yeah.
yeah,
Because there's nothing, not even the names have been changed to protect the innocent in Jarvis's case.
no,
And it's always poignant to listen to now, knowing that Deborah did die.
yeah,
And I can't imagine what it's like for Jarvis if he sings it. It must be
absolutely.
uh,
Oh,
such a strange dichotomy that it's a barnstorming rocker as well. It's just
yeah,
like,
and a bit of T-Rex. I find a bit of
yeah,
T-Rex glam in it, and
and a lot of Gloria by Laura Branigan. With
yes, 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 yeah,
the
yeah. No, I think that's one of my favorite songs on the album. And as I said,
yeah,
I'm repeating myself. I think it's the heart of the album. So,
yeah,
Live Bed Show. That's an interesting one. Um,
yeah.
very melancholy. And
Hmm.
again, he's doing, creating a narrative about an aging lady who could be Lady of the Night, that's sort of stuck in yesterday and looking back fondly at yesterday and maybe not dealing with tomorrow and what
Hmm.
could have been. And again, he's doing these little kitchen sink dramas, but making it just wildly important and compelling.
Yeah, and he anthropomorph. I can never say that word. You know what I mean? Anthropomorphizes. I think that's about right. A bed, literally. So it is partially told from the bed's point of view, or imagines. He's imagining things from the bed's point of view, but really he's talking about his own love life, where the bed's seen it all, but now the bed has nothing to say, and it's, you know, the neighbours can't complain about the headboard these days. They used to have a lot to complain about, but not anymore. Again, it's Jarvis being wistful about his own love life, where he used to have. So he says about 7 years ago when he bought it for £10 from a shop down the road. Again, such an English way of writing. You know, who else would think an American band wouldn't write about where they bought their bed for £10 from a little shop 7 years ago? That's just such not even a British and English thing to do. A very Ray Davies again thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's such again a horny track where but not in a dirty way. He's just missing having connection. It never comes off as sleazy. He's missing having
he just does it on the right side of it. The next song, I find another unemotional one, and it's a beautiful song. Something's Changed. What do you think of this one?
For a minute you think it's going to be the first like acoustic ballad the album's had, and then it turns into one of the heavier tracks on the album, which kind of sums up the album in general, really, where it can, not in the way that say the Pixies would or whatnot, but there is very much a quiet, loud thing with Pulp in a totally different way, where they can be heavy as all hell, but then completely wistful. And here you get it in pretty much the same track. I mean, it's got a lot of just acoustic guitar strumming by Jarvis, but then it does get really heavy with Mark on guitar. And he's doing another very biographical, autobiographical lyric about singing the song, writing the song 2 hours before he meets this girl. But before he'd actually met her for the first time, he'd already written the lyrics. So he's kind of writing it for an imaginary, what he wishes that he's about to meet, and how he could have gone to see a film instead, and you might have changed your mind and seen your friends. Life could have been very different, but then something changed, and then it hits into this big, massive chorus that starts talking about, do you believe in God, basically, and does he have a timetable directing acts of love? Why did I write this song on that one day? It's nobody else was writing this, and I don't think anybody else has quite written it since this type of track. Jarvis is just such a very idiosyncratic writer.
Absolutely. Look, I love this song. I think it's great.
It's gorgeous track.
No, and I think it's about chance, coincidence, sliding doors, how relationships happen, shit happens. You meet somebody and you know, it's whether it's divine intervention or things happen and you can't, some things are just unexpected, and I think he's writing in that frame. But you summed up the lyrics really well. And he just makes it just so heartfelt. Again, that's an emotional sort of center point of this whole album. Then you've got the next one, slightly controversial, sorted for ease and whiz, and it's got a Stone Roses connection, which I'll tell you about in a second. So what do you think of this song?
Well, so ease and whiz are their own Stone Roses connection. But for anybody not familiar with the parlance, that's ecstasy and speed. So it was on the front pages of newspapers. This filthy band have released this track. Filthy band. Pulp must be the least filthy band of all the major Britpop acts. And it's a parody. If you listen to this, a bit like every time a controversial film about whatever, say Scorsese's Last Temptation, it's usually the people that haven't seen it that start to judge it before. And in this case, it was the Tory media started judging this track. And to be fair, some of the left-wing media, because the Mirror were one of them as well. started judging this based purely on the title, that we are sorted for ease and whiz, so we're okay. Whereas what they're actually doing is parodying how weird it is to be playing festivals all of a sudden after the success of the last album. They're not high in the bill, but they're still there. And it's a very festival-like track where they're singing about, again, that's what happens at festivals. It is very much a tradition, and I know from making videos with so many Americans in particular, they don't really have that scene where you would go in the summer to a festival. They might go to a gig, but not really the festival scene, where you go to Glastonbury, you go to Tea in the Park, you go to Transmat. And that is part of the culture, is unfortunately, you know, for better or worse, when you're that age, getting off your face. And you would be on ease and whiz when you're a teenager quite a lot of the time, just to keep you going through the day, because it starts in the morning and it ends at pretty much the same time the next morning and keeps going for 3 days. So you need to be on something to keep. And it's Jarvis's kind of disenfranchised nature with that scene. He's saying, I don't really like this. And this is also where he's starting to see the people that used to beat him up. And he's singing about that.
Yes.
But the press are taking it to mean we are sorted for ease and whiz. And that's completely not what the lyric is. You can actually just read the lyric and it's quite obvious what they're saying. But once more, any storm in a teacup will get the red tops and the Daily Mail rumbling, and this certainly did. They were decried on the front page of newspapers, which in retrospect probably helped them absolutely massively, because this was very much the era where, what's that controversial band? We need to check them out. So
Yeah,
backfired. And this was the double A same, as you mentioned, with Misshapes that we did mention. So,
nothing succeeds like controversy, but he apparently was talking to a girl who went to a Stone Roses concert, and he sort of said, what were the Roses like? And she said, I can't remember them, but all I remember from the gig was people asking, are you sorted for ease and whiz? So he picked that into a bit of a commentary of maybe the hollow and artificial drug culture. And I think he's done some interviews where he doesn't like the artificial high. He prefers the real high of music without being sort of induced by drugs. And that's a whole topic in itself, because there's a whole genre of music.
It's very much Jarvis writing a track that is exactly the opposite of what he's been attacked for writing. But I think the writer in him kind of enjoyed that, because that puts him into that class as well of being the misunderstood artist, not just the artist, but the misunderstood artist. And I'm sure the record company loved it. A front page advert for Pulp all over the UK. So
absolutely. The next one is, and it's spelt. The spelling is expanded. Is Feeling Called Love. What do you think of this one? I find it quite dramatic. Bit of drama.
It's dramatic and it's very brooding and moody. It's not one of my favorites on the track, but it does ramp up on the album, but it does ramp up nicely for the choruses. I think one thing to mention about the album in general is that it's sequenced incredibly well, where you do have quite a few more laid back croony tracks, and you do have some that have heavy stomping parts and brood and are quite intense. And this is one of those. But they always know exactly when to follow one with other. So you never feel like you're in a stupor, or you're that's a bit samey. It flows so well. In fact, one thing we haven't mentioned, literally the songs segue into each other for most of the tracks as well. There's not even a half a second gap. They go straight into one another. It's not one of my favorite tracks on the album, but again, to take it out would mean that you go straight from Sorted from Ease and Whiz
to Underwear,
which wouldn't work. So it's perfectly put in there to give you a little bit of, to use the drug analogy again, a downer. After the Sorted for Ease and Whiz is quite an upper. But again, it still has a great ramp up for the choruses too.
Yeah, it does. And there's conjecture that it may have been influenced by the band Wire, because Wire did an exact same song under the name called Feeling Called Love. and a lot of the Pulp folk were influenced very heavy into the punk scene prior to forming Pulp. So maybe
There's
true,
no way
maybe
that,
to
no way
verify
that
that.
Jarvis would know why. There's no way he wouldn't. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Then we have Underwear. This is a very interesting song, just the perspective of the narrator on this one. What do you think of this song? And I'll tell you
So
my views.
Underwear is another track where again it would be it's on the face of it, it's ridiculously it's almost Carry On Britpop, where he's Carry On's a kind of British sex romp for comedy series for anybody who isn't aware. But Jarvis is singing these lyrics where you'd think a song like Underwear would be quite sexy and whatnot, but it's not. He's really singing, why don't you shut the door, close the curtains? You're not going anywhere. He's coming up the stairs, and in a moment he'll want to see your underwear. I couldn't stop it now. There's no way to get out. He's standing too near. How did you get here? Naked in someone else's room. I'd give my whole life to see it. Just you stood there in your underwear. It's quite this is as close to properly sleazy and wanting to put this person through something as this album gets. If you could close your eyes and just remember this is what you wanted last night, why is it so hard for you to touch him, for you to give yourself to him? Oh, Jesus. I mean, this is a song of, we've talked about Jarvis's needs and wants sexually and romantically. This feels like the more frustrated aspect of that. But he still can't quite bring himself to sing, to make it too bad. So he lets her keep her underwear. It's bizarre. It's as close to Jarvis taking on a dark persona as I think this album gets.
Yeah, I find it a bit sad because I think that the narrator loves this girl, but she's describing a scenario where she's obviously lost her virginity or had sexual relations with somebody that if she was sober, in the sober light of day, she wouldn't have. And, it was a case of, oops, what have I done? And it's through the eyes of Jarvis as the narrator who really loves this girl, but seeing that she's in this sort of situation. And she's probably progressed from something that was quite innocent into something that was sexual, and it's just out of control. So I find it, the way he's pitched himself as the narrator in this song, very interesting. And, he's pulled it off. Because it could have gone pear-shaped the way he, in this subject matter.
Very much so. But he pitches it very much as the wounded party who's disappointed, and you can almost imagine him thinking all this but never acting on it. It never, in the context of the whole album and of knowing who Jarvis Cocker is, he wouldn't. This isn't some kind of sleazy track that you would get from some other artists. For example, if Oasis, and they never would have, but if they'd have done a song like this, you'd be no doubt that they were in it to embarrass this girl and were humiliating her. But Pulp are definitely not that. It is very much just another portrait of life, a slice of life.
You're in safe hands with Jarvis. You're in safe hands. So Monday Morning. I like the instrumentation of this. It's just, sonically, it's really interesting. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the most I don't want to say classic rock because that's got its own connotations, but classically rock-like track with a really cool, very upfront bass propelling the whole thing. And it's got a wonderful sentiment that everybody can identify with. Going back to, I don't know, Elvis Costello's Welcome to the Working Week. It's one of those, oh God, we've just wasted the weekend and here we are all over again. It's Monday morning. I need to start this crap all over again. What have I done with my life?
Who likes Monday mornings? Not many people.
Yeah. So, literally, when you go out late from Monday till Saturday turns into Sunday, and now we're back in Monday, so you can do it all over again. And we go, and then you get the which is almost like filler lyrics, because he's saying how pointless the week is. There's no point in adding lyrics to it. Almost, it's kind of, there's nothing to the week. It's just you're stuck there. I want a refund. I want a light. I want a reason to help me make it through the night.
Yeah.
But again, there's still this wistful melancholy to it when he's singing, you finally left school, now what are you going to do? You're so grown up, you're so, so mature. And it's very much, you've left school, what's for you is just a life of absolute 9 till 5 misery, if you're lucky enough to have a job in the first place. Which, again, for a band that came from the north of England, growing up under Thatcher, you can see that kind of thing being very much part of the whole raison d'etre and forming a band, because they did struggle for years, as you said. But then it is also a kind of great lament to that time in your life where, even when you're skint, when you have absolutely no money whatsoever, you still feel the need to go out, and somehow you manage it all the time, even if it's just going round to friends. And there's always somebody with a few tins, a few cans, and bottles. I know it's stupid, but I can't seem to spend the night at home because my friends left town and I'm here all alone. Hey ho. It's literally got a hey ho in it. But it's that great kind of, no, I feel the need to do something, so I'm not going to stay home. I'm going to go out there and do something at least. So yeah, it's a terrific song. It's a terrific song.
There's a few songs about Monday, like the great David Bowie, Black Star, said, what was it? What the fuck happened to Monday?
Yes.
And one of my favorite movies, Bright Lights, Big City, which is about the cocaine culture in the 80s. There's a line in it, whatever the fuck happened to Monday, when he was in a cocaine stupor. So there's this whole imagery around Monday, and I really like how he encapsulates it in this
Michael
song.
J. Fox? Was that Michael J. Fox?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually a much meatier movie that you would expect that a Michael J. Fox movie would be. It's really underrated.
Casualties of War era, where he was trying to be more than Martin McFly.
Yeah. But I like the David Bowie-esque vocals in this.
That's so funny that you mentioned Bowie there, because it does have a very 80s Bowie-ness to it. If it was on a Bowie record, unlike earlier on where it would have been on a Berlin era album for Bowie where we mentioned it, this would have been on Let's Dance or something like that. It's a very different type of Bowie.
Absolutely. And I love the start, which is a Morricone type guitar. It sounds like that spaghetti guitar, and then it goes into something that's kind of dub and ska, and then it goes into the Pulp anthem. So it's a shapeshifter all the way through. It's just really, really interesting. No, I love that. All right. So we're getting near the end. Track 12, Bar Italia. What do you think of this one?
So I really like Bar Italia, but it feels like a quite genteel way to end the album until it really isn't. Again, it's one of those loud, quiet tracks, but still the loudness betrays the tenderness of the lyrics, where this is dark. Jarvis is singing some dark stuff about this relationship here. We're singing, if they knock down this place, it still will look much better than you. You think, oh, that's a bit. Look at you. You're looking so confused. What did you lose? Never mind. It's just your mind. It's very much a put down track, a diss track, and knowing it's called Bar Italia, and knowing how ridiculously autobiographical lyrics are, I can only imagine Jarvis had a bad breakup at somewhere called Bar Italia. I haven't read that, but I can only imagine that must have happened. Musically, it starts as one of the more slow laments of the album, but again ramps right the way up to take it into quite an angry and bitter track. It is easily the most bitter track on the record, about a relationship gone bad, but quite an intimidating relationship. Again, one of the tracks where you can imagine it's Jarvis's darker aspects talking, if not Jarvis himself, it's his psyche perhaps that he's imagining.
Yeah. Well, to me, I wrote it down. It's a song about the party's over. It's in between the party. It's a bit of a torch song. It's the end of the night. It's downtime, and yeah, it's like when you compare how the album starts to how it ends, it's night and day.
Yeah.
Well, great. I've really enjoyed covering these songs. I think it's a fantastic album, and it's one of the great Britpop albums of the 90s. How do you think where do you think Pulp is in today's rock pantheon? Do you think people have forgotten about them? Because I think when people talk about Britpop, they really just do talk about Oasis and Blur. Has Pulp been sort of kind of forgotten?
It's a difficult one because Britpop has now turned into a parent's generation of music, which is very strange for me to think that my generation is now the dad rock type generation.
Classic rock.
Yeah, when you start to hear singles that you bought in the 90s on oldies stations, it's very strange. But Pulp, they always have those 4 or 5 singles that will keep them at the very top of the conversation, which will keep them even above the likes of Suede and Portishead to me. It won't keep them above Blur and Oasis, but that's like not to compare the quality, but that's like the Beatles and the Stones. So there's no shame in only being the Kinks or the Who in that conversation.
Yes.
To me, if I could put down all the albums of Britpop, I'd take Different Class above any Oasis and maybe any Blur, maybe. Um,
Yeah.
there's
Yep. I sort of agree with you. I think it's right up there. So it's not too controversial. I would agree with Oasis, even though that those first two, I did kind of minor slag Oasis before, but those first two Oasis albums are extremely stellar. It was a slippery slope after that. Blur, they're I've always been a Blur fan, and I think they're
yeah,
top
me too.
shelf.
Yeah,
And Damon is a similar sort of lyricist to Jarvis in the sense of making these kitchen sink dramas compelling, like The Great Escape. It's about there's topics about wife swapping and country houses and just ordinary people, but just making it compelling. So he's in a different sort of stream, but I find that Jarvis is more biting and
yeah, and I
takes it that
think
step further.
I prefer Damon when we get a little bit later in the Britpop cycle, probably towards the end into albums like 13. And you have tracks like Tender and things, whereas the height of Britpop, they were doubling down on the London connection and very much doing the, as you said, country house, and Oasis were doing Roll With It and Wonderwall and those kind of tracks. So it was very much North versus South at the street, and Pulp kind of found this niche in the middle. But to be honest, I still have actually Ocean Colour Scene before Oasis. So it is a scene that to this day you can still dig right into. And there was even legacy bands who were making Britpop era albums that sounded Britpop like Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark made a great album right in the middle of Britpop, which had Walking in the Milky Way on it, which is a pure Britpop track from OMD, which might sound weird, but again, as you said, Pulp had been going for 12 years by the time this came out, so it's not that weird that an early 80s band could exist in Britpop as well.
Yeah.
So to me, if it's not at the very top, there's not much that can beat it, and if it does, it's not by much more than a nose. So yeah,
Absolutely.
well titled, because a different class of an album, and deals with class in such a fantastically northern way that it's a brilliantly dense lyrical album, musical album. sequenced perfectly, 12 tracks that I think it's about 52 minutes, something like that. Flies by because of the sequence, and every few minutes something happens that just makes you perk up. Every other line, something's interesting and strange, and just keeps your attention. Just that's as a thinker of an album. It's not just written for the Glastonbury choruses to sing along to, although
Absolutely.
that happened inadvertently. So.
Yeah. And it also created Jarvis into a bit of a star.
Yes.
And I mean, he's well known. He's still well known now.
Yes.
Does a lot of radio work, and he's on the I believe on the telly in Britain. And a lot of it was he was quite notorious for a certain incident in the music award show. We can't let the show end without having a little bit of a chat about that, Davy.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the viewers?
Yeah. So first of all, here's a great movie called Pulp, which is a documentary about the reunion tour, but it does go into the kind of band's story as well. Not too much. It's not one of those, talking heads and then this happens, this that. It's not one of those. It's much more artistic than that, but that it does go into that a little bit. Michael Jackson was doing Earth Song on stage at the Brits. The Brits at the time were a very big deal. Nowadays, nobody could tell you who wins what, but it was a very big deal.
Yes.
To win the Brit was, oh my God, who's going to win it this year?
It's like an Oscar. It's like the Oscars.
Yeah, it was, especially when, as you said at the start, British music was so insular at the time. It was basically the world's music awards because nothing else from outside was coming in at all. Everything was British, so it was like everything. It was everything you liked was competing against each other. And Michael Jackson was getting some lifetime achievement awards, and he did that song, Earth Song, "What About Us," which is one of the most overblown, nonsensical. I mean, the video is him doing the Christ thing with the, flowing white robes and blah, blah, blah. And Jarvis thought that this was just disgusting. The idea of Michael Jackson doing, he's never done anything for the environment or the earth, but here he is preaching to a room full of celebrities. And after one too many, Jarvis jumps on stage, and the press did report it has tried to attack Michael Jackson. That never happened. He got on stage and attempted to moon Michael Jackson. Never mind moonwalk. He tried to moon Michael Jackson and ended up just kind of mooning the audience. But that, again, added to the Pulp
legend, the legend, mythology.
And it became very much a moment in time for the Brits and for Pulp that kind of defined we're not just here to make up the numbers. And we're not just one of the rest. We don't like this kind of crap. We stand for something. And what Jarvis stands for is equality. It starts out literally with Misshapes, as we know on the album, and humility and being down to earth, and songs about relationships
and vulnerable, and just nothing wrong in being vulnerable, and sort of.
So the idea of Michael Jackson preaching about Earth Song and things was just so abhorrent to him. And again, I do have to throw in, he'd had a couple of shandies at that point. And I don't think he likes talking about it in interviews too much, but it's again that, and the front page of the papers for the Sorted for Reason Wiz could not have done them any more good. It's that especially in that culture where it was the youth culture. What was cooler than that? They're taking down this older icon, Michael Jackson, who was so uncool at the time. It was, floating the big statue of himself up the Thames and things. It was like, no, thank you. And then Jarvis takes him down a peg. It just felt like, oh, brilliant. This is Britpop literally saying, no, thank you. We don't need your
enough.
Yeah. Goodbye. We've got our own scene going on here. And what a scene.
Well, that actually made news in Australia, and I think it did make big news in America on MTV. So that was probably the limited exposure that Pulp did get in America through this incident. But it definitely, I think it was almost front page news in Australia. It did make an impact because of this star that was willing to stand up to Michael Jackson and say, cut the crap.
Yeah, you're just full of it, and you're doing absolutely nothing that really helps, because none of the money went to environmental causes or anything. It was just a pure piece of fluff.
It,
Um,
narcissism.
as you see, though, Jarvis does have this legacy that continues in terms of his radio show that was on for years was one of the most eclectic and brilliant shows that BBC Radio did. He was in one of the Harry Potter films, for goodness sake, when they have a band that comes to play at one of the Hogwarts, is it Hogwarts? And it's Jarvis Cocker as the lead singer of the band. So he does have this legacy where people might not even know it as Jarvis Cocker, but they'll have seen him in the Harry Potter movie. So it's a fascinating guy.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Davy. You've done it again. This has been another fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed covering this album. Pulp, different class. There you go.
Yeah,
bit of a shiny cover, bit shiny on the old lights, but
the deluxe edition action going on, and well recommended this one too. You get demos and a nice connection. Nick Cave remix of Disco 2000, the pub rock version.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stomper, but no worries. All right, well, everyone, please put your comments. Tell us what you think of this album. And I can tell you for sure that Davey and I will do another, delve into another British classic. I think we've got a bit of a theme going here. Let's keep it going. And please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation, and also check out Davy's channel. It's fantastic, and he can be seen on Sea of Tranquility. I'll put all the details on the YouTube clip, and check us out. All right, see you later.